Greetings and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Marissa Smith with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and thank you for joining us for utilizing strategic foresight to maximize business potential. Today's presenter is Dr. Tasha Hart-Marema, a 2021 graduate with her PhD from the University of Minnesota, and I am so excited to turn things over to Dr. Hart-Marema in just a moment. But before I do, I have two announcements. First, I want to give a shout out to our Alumni Association members. The Alumni Association is a member organization, and our members make initiatives like our webinar series possible. So if you're joining today's session as a member, thank you so much for your support. And if you're interested in learning more about what membership is and the benefits of becoming a member and supporting our work, check us out online at umnalumni.org/membership. Next, I wanted to highlight a few additional upcoming virtual webinars and opportunities that we have that you might be interested in. Coming up on November 2nd, we have Navigating NIL, Name, Image, and Likeness, what it means for the University of Minnesota. And on November 21st, we'll be joined again by Dr. Hart-Marema for Using Data to Understand Your Business. To learn more about these and all of our other upcoming events, you can visit umnalumni.org/events. Our webinars are always recorded and shared online on Goldmine, so you can catch this talk and other talks just like it on our website at umnalumni.org/Goldmine. Now, without further delay, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Tasha Hart-Marema. As an industrial, organizational psychology and human resource development practitioner, Dr. Hart-Marema created Heart Holistic Strategies to help others start their businesses, streamline the services offered by existing businesses, and strengthen professional development initiatives. We are so lucky to have her with us today, and I'm going to turn things over to her now.
Hi, everyone. Okay, my name is Dr. Tasha Hart-Marema. I am so happy to be here today to actually have this talk with you. That was a wonderful introduction from Melissa. As I get into the presentation, I'm going to turn off my camera so that you guys can focus on the slides and what's being said. So I'm going to do that now. But so Um, just to tell you a little bit about me, I know that Marissa already told you that I am an IO psychologist I got my doctorate in human resource development. So the purpose of this webinar actually is an extension of something that I have been working on in partnership with David Balsman, who is the founder of a company called Develop Me. He is a computer scientist and he does IT consulting. And we ended up getting together to create a course, which is called Business Planning and Entrepreneurship. And that's actually what we have been working on. And this particular webinar, a lot of the information in this webinar is greatly expounded upon in the course. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to discuss what strategic foresight is and what it looks like in business. And then we're going to discuss the need for data in business and which specific type of data you should start with when you're thinking about developing a business or even growing your business. And then we're going to look at legal business structures, legal business entities, integrating strategic foresight, and then just understanding what it means to have a measurable goal. And at the end of the webinar, we will have time for questions and answers. So just a Q&A session. So when we talk about strategic foresight, you've probably heard of what it means to, you probably know what it means to, when you hear people say strategy, you automatically think, oh, plan. When you hear people say foresight, you think seeing ahead. Strategic foresight is a little bit more in-depth, and actually it's a lot more in-depth than that, because strategic foresight is an area of future-oriented thinking. And so I'll start by saying one of the things that strategic foresight is not, it is not predictions. We're not trying to predict the future. We're trying to prepare for it when we're talking about strategic foresight. So really, we're talking about learning. It's forward thinking. And one of the ways that we integrate our forward thinking into business is we think about benchmarks, developing benchmarks, KPIs, which are key performance indicators of how well your business is doing or how well somebody else's business is doing in the same industry that you're in. And then we're looking at finances for financial planning. Can we continue to do what we're doing? Can we do what we want to do financially? And then there are benefits of integrating strategic foresight into the very beginning of your business, and that comes with innovation, competitive edge, and the possibility to reduce risk. So these are just a few of the things that when we're talking about strategic foresight, that you really want to keep in mind that it's not just about forecasting or making predictions about what your business is doing. Rather, we want to focus on what you can do. So the goals and objectives, a lot of people, when you're talking about strategic foresight, they think strategic planning and they think scenario planning, which are both in their own right very important parts of business planning, business formation, business success. But strategic planning has is focused on the long-term goals, and there are predetermined steps that someone will create in order to reach a specific outcome. Now, with strategic foresight, there's not necessarily a specific outcome that you're hoping for beyond like organizational success. So what you're actually trying to do is just think of different things that can happen. So strategic foresight is more about having a way to think about your business. And this is why I put scenario planning in the middle of strategic planning and strategic foresight, because scenario planning, it embraces the uncertainty of business. And so you're going to plan for the good and the bad, and you're going to try to come up with different scenarios of what might happen. Um, Not necessarily what might happen, but what could happen. And that's where strategic foresight is integrated between strategic planning and scenario planning. So the process, I know this particular topic may be of a lot of interest to entrepreneurs and early business owners or new business owners, or even small business owners who have something really good but just want to know how to make it better because of unforeseen circumstances. You just want to be prepared. So the process of even jumping into a strategic foresight, I guess the process of jumping into a strategic foresight way of business or way of thinking, I would say begin with the end in mind. And this kind of goes into strategic planning because you know that there is something that you're hoping to get out of your business. Most people would say if it's a for-profit business, your goal is to make profits. Some people, if you have an ethical component, then you'll say my goal is to make a social impact. So the first thing you're going to do when even thinking about or conceptualizing how you want your business to run is environmental scanning. You want to look at competitors, see what they're doing. You want to look at the financial health of the economy for your industry and for yourself if you're going to be an individual business owner. You want to look at new markets, new technologies. You want to try to pay attention to what people are saying if you're selling a product or if you're marketing a service. So you just want to scan your environment for all of these different factors that may influence how your business operates. The next thing you're going to do is look at scenario building. Scenario building is a very involved process because there's really no right way. There's a way that works well, and then there are ways that are less efficient. But you need to think through different scenarios that are good and bad to prepare for various outcomes. So one scenario might be if you're an independent consultant, thinking about what happens if you get a large volume of clients. You know, you're a single person and you have 20 clients, and they all have um, vastly approaching deadline. That might be one scenario that you need to prepare for it, and then maybe put things in place that kind of prevent that type of overload, whether that be outsourcing some of the work or limiting the number of clients you take on. So this is what scenario building entails, and it can be multiple scenarios. The goal with scenario building, though, is to come up with scenarios that you can actually think through and possibly test. And the last thing in the process with even beginning to implement strategic foresight into developing your business would be to make sure you're always monitoring and adjusting as you go through the planning process. So you're going to look at the feedback of what happened. You're going to pay attention to how you felt as you were doing the things, if you're an independent consultant, or if you're even if you're the CEO of a company, you want to make sure that you look at each and every part of the inputs and outputs of your business so that you can analyze and revise your plans and your operations based on what's happening. Now, in order for all of that to work, we need data. So a lot of businesses, and I know it's become very popular where you hear people say, "Oh, we have a data scientist," or "We're looking at data analytics," or "We have key metrics that we're paying attention to." I'm going to take it to the very basics, especially for people who are just starting out with their businesses or people who just have an idea and maybe want to do something along the lines of starting a business eventually. At the very basics, the very core of business planning, before even trying to get to metrics and understanding what they mean, you need to define success. What does that look like for you and for your business? Some people, when new businesses, success looks like for them having $100,000 in revenue within the first 6 months. Other people, success looks like having 5 clients in the first 6 months. So it just depends. You need to determine if you want to focus on social impacts or financial impacts. I would encourage you to focus on both, depending on the type of business that you have. Some people have businesses set up to where they just want to create residual income. A residual income is like passive income. It's where you initially starting out, you're hands on, you're setting things up, and then toward the end, it makes money without you having to be hands on. You just check in every so often to make sure everything is running properly. Um, as far as data, we need data. We need to come up with an end-to-end strategy. And so when we're defining success, we need to make sure that we're having clear goals of what success means so that we can measure if we actually met that goal. If my goal is to have $100,000 in revenue within the first 6 months, that is an easy metric because in 6 months, I can look back and say, did I have $100,000 in revenue? If my goal is to have a certain amount of social impact within a certain community, then my strategy is going to look a little bit different because I'm going to have to figure out a way to determine if I made a social impact. So I'm going to have to, come up with surveys or different strategies for understanding if the community that I'm serving actually benefited from the service or product that I'm providing. And these are the things that you need to think about from the very beginning when you're defining success. A lot of people have a really great idea and then they just go and do it, but you have no way of knowing if it could have been done better if you don't actually implement from the very beginning strategies to assess the health of the business or of the operations. So this is what I call end-to-end strategy and involves practical processes for understanding the business and for getting feedback about the business so that you can test what you've been doing. With all of that being said, the next thing, which this is a bit out of order, but it's very important when we're talking about strategic foresight, a lot of people will start businesses and they say, I have this great idea, and now I need to become a legal entity. So, a business structure is different from a business model. Your business model deals with how your business operates, how you actually bring in money. like the business model of DoorDash or Uber. Those are peer-to-peer services. So their business model is having one person share their stuff or use their personal belongings to connect with another person. That's a business model. A business structure is a legally recognized entity. So there are multiple business structures, but I'm going to talk about the three primary. The first is a sole proprietorship, and there's a limited liability company, which is the most common for small business owners and new business owners. And then there are corporations, which we're all familiar with. Each of these have very distinct benefits, like pros and cons. A sole proprietorship is the simplest form because there's no legal distinction between you as an individual and your business. That means if I wanted to run a business, and I could work under my name, it would be Tasha S. Hart is the Hart Mrema is the business owner. There's but that also means that I have full liability if anything goes wrong with the service or product that I'm providing, because there's no distinction between me and the business. Um, and there are different tax implications with this as well. Because there's no distinction between me and the business, I would be able to use my own personal social security number in order to conduct business. With the limited liability company, there are two options. You can have a single member LLC or a multi-member LLC. Um, and member just means owner in this particular capacity. A limited liability company is legally separate from its owners, and it has something called pass-through taxation. It's flexible ownership options, and I would not be held legally liable for a lot of things that the business does because the business would be considered separate from me. Like Heart Holistic Strategies is its own entity. And so Tasha Hart Mrema is not liable for the things that goes on, although ethically that shouldn't be a problem. But there are just some things that you want to make sure that you're covering your bases on, particularly if you want to hire employees. Um, Corporations, on the other hand, this is the big deal of businesses, right? This is, of course, there's legal separation, there's limited liability. You can even own stock. But the problem with corporations, although it's only a problem for certain types of corporations, is the risk of double taxation, which we will get to in just a moment. But as far as these companies go, I will say the most common is limited liability company. Sole proprietors are people who work as freelance artists, um, independent contractors, and things like that, even independent consultants. One of the benefits what I see a lot of people do is they still go ahead and form a limited liability company because it allows you to get an EIN, which is an employee identification number, so that when you are hiring clients or people are paying you, you don't have to use your social security number. You can use your business your EIN, and it's the same with a corporation. So the financial considerations with developing your business and picking the right business structure is revenue. Revenue is just about how much cash flow goes through. When you're a sole proprietor, even with LLCs, taxation, so revenue and taxation go hand in hand when we're talking about strategically thinking about which business entity we want to develop. Because when you're self-employed is what it's going to be for a sole proprietor, even for an LLC, unless you choose to pay yourself as an employee, which then you would be legally a limited liability company, but you can be considered an S corporation. And that just means you're an employee to yourself. Your company employs you. Um, so the tax considerations are very important when thinking about how to start your business and how to structure it. The self-employment taxes are required for single member LLCs as well as sole proprietorships. And the more you make, the higher the tax rate. I think that's the way that it works logically. But the problem is when everything is considered profit, even if it wasn't all used as profit when you're doing it as a sole proprietor. So if your business has revenue of $400,000, even though you used 150,000 to operate your business, you run the risk of actually being taxed on the entire $400,000 because it's like that's the amount of money that you were paid as an individual, since there's no legal distinction between you and your business. Um, Another thing to consider before actually filing for your legal business entity is the level of growth that you think will happen. You can't actually predict this. Maybe you can. Some people might have a really good idea of the type of growth, but it is something to consider because if you think you're going to have to hire employees, then I wouldn't advise working as a sole proprietor, maybe an LLC, but you'd also have to consider the possibility of a corporation depending on how fast your business is going to grow. If you need to hire people, if you need to have, outsiders come in to review in excess of revenue, which would be great. These are just things that you want to consider. So now, when we're talking about implementing strategic foresight and putting all of those things together with business planning, something that comes up a lot when I talk to my clients and when I talk to people who are very much so interested in starting a business is I hear people say, I wish I knew how to do that, or I wish I knew that I needed to do this if they already have a business. And the one thing that comes up a lot is business planning. When you have such a great idea or you think you can do it, or sometimes it's something that you've been doing for years and now you want to monetize it, a lot of people skip over the planning process. And planning is ongoing, it doesn't end. So you have to continue going back and forth and revising. Um, that's one of the things that's very, very important. A lot of people wish they knew the importance of financial management and just understanding where to start with that. Market research, which is part of the data. We say we need data to fully understand and to know how the business is going to do. Market research would be one of the top things that a lot of people skip out on because they are not looking at competitors or they don't know what type of market research to get. And then the another thing would be legal and regulatory requirements. Some of the things that I hear a lot of people say they wish they knew include learning about networking, time management, delegating tasks, because new business owners often take on a lot of responsibilities by themselves, and they later realize the importance of delegating tasks and building capable teams, and just being resilient. Going back to market research, another segment of that would be understanding customer or consumer feedback and setting realistic expectations for yourself if you're going to work as a small business owner where you're in charge of everything. You're responsible for everything. So you have to set realistic expectations and you just have to make sure that each and even setting benchmarks and timelines for when you'll come back to the drawing board to review your business plan, and how you'll manage financially. As with most things, going back to how I like to begin with the end in mind. And that is just starting with what does success look like for me, and then working your way back to see how you'll get there. We need to remember that uncertainty will always exist. And with strategic foresight, one of the things that makes it about perpetual learning rather than prediction is that sometimes there's no experience for us to compare to because what we're doing is so new or is so unique to our specific situation that we don't have any other companies that are doing what we're doing for us to go and compare and see how they succeeded or how they failed. And then the next thing would be your business model matters. While you can change your legal filing for business structure, it's a little bit more difficult to change your business model because if we have let's go back to Uber. This is more dealing with legal requirements and regulations in certain locations. But if Uber suddenly decided that they no longer wanted to do the peer-to-peer model for their drivers and they wanted to do a complete overhaul, that would be very difficult because they grew exponentially based on that business model. So when you're starting out, you want to make sure that you're thinking through different options for business models and transitions when your business grows. And that's why you do scenario building, scenario testing, and then all types of planning. You can even get into there's strategic planning, but you can get into succession planning for when you no longer want to be fully involved hands on, if you want residual income, how your business will transition to someone else. So, again, scenario testing, and don't skip the planning process. I think that's pretty much all I have. So, I'm going to open it up for if you all have any questions. I'd love to hear them, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Hartmarama. That was really insightful advice, information, and just a really good overall primer for things to be thinking about as you start a business. There were things that I learned that were new, things that I had heard a little bit about before, but now feel like I have more clarity on. So thank you so much for preparing that content and sharing it with us. As we wait to see if there are questions from those participating today, I'd love to know a little bit more about your career journey. Would you be willing to share a little bit with us about your experience? Maybe you just focus on, how you started Heart Holistic Strategies, or if you want to paint the whole path for us, either would be really, I think, wonderful to hear about.
Yeah, I started Heart Holistic Strategies back in 2021 officially, but I have been doing consulting work for different clients for a couple of years. I have people come to me, I got my PhD in human resource development, and I had my master's degree in IO psychology, which is work psychology. And I had a lot of people come to me and say, "Hey, I have this idea about this. I need to start this. I wish I knew how to do it." And I would say, "Oh, okay, I'll do it." And I was doing that. I helped quite a few people start their businesses. And I was talking to a friend, and she's like, "Why are you, when are you going to actually do it for real?" And so that's kind of how Holistic Strategies came to be. It was already something that I was doing, um, mostly as a sole proprietor because it's Tasha doing the work. And then it just like, okay, well, I actually want to have it be a company, and it grew. I ended up partnering with David Baldwin of In Develop Me. He has his own company. But when we partnered to put our businesses together to start developing courses, business related, it grew exponentially. My network expanded, and it helped a lot.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. I'm curious, again, if folks are participating, want to use the chat feature or the Q&A button to submit a question for Dr. Hartmarama. But in the meantime, what do you feel like is maybe one or two common mistakes that folks make as they're launching a new business?
I think a lot of people, I'll say a lot of people actually fail to, oh, it's one of my favorite sayings. It's quite common, but it's still one of my favorite sayings, is that people don't plan to fail. They fail to plan. And I think a lot of people, when you're looking at startup costs for a business, a lot of people assume that if we don't need investors, I don't need investors. So it's not going to be that much. You're not realizing the legal ramifications of it and fully understanding that although you have your annual report that you have to file with your state, there are also franchise taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes. So that's a huge component that I think a lot of independent business owners don't fully recognize when they first start out.
That's great insight. Is there anything else that you would want to share, or do you want to give a little preview of the November webinar about data?
The November webinar, so this was just the introductory ones, just talking about strategic foresight and what that means, hopefully prepping people for understanding the type of data that you need to get. Um, what I as an IO psychologist, I do a lot with statistics. That's work psychology. We do like work engagement surveys. We do psychometric assessments. I have begun for my own clients integrating those things into the services that I provide for them. And then it got me to thinking about how when you first start, if you really do begin with the end in mind, when you offer a service to someone, a lot of people, once you get it, you buy something and then you get a survey that says, "Hey, how did you use this? How did you like it? Was it better?" I think new business owners, while they every people get annoyed with those things, that information really, really helps. And so the second webinar will be about how to get that information, but then how to use it. Because sometimes, depending on the type of data you get, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, you're able to ask new questions from the information that you have. It's kind of like when I explained in this webinar about how you don't necessarily have experience to learn from if what you're doing hasn't been done before. And so in the next webinar, just because you have the data and you're getting all these different metrics, you can have Google Analytics, you can have, all the social media numbers. What does that mean for you? And that's what the second webinar will be about.
Wonderful. Well, I am looking forward to that. And we've got a lot of buzz already building about that webinar. So thank you so much, Dr. Hartmarimer, for your time today and for your insights. And we'll be sharing the recording out with folks after today's session, and look forward to connecting with you again soon for another webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything.
Bye now. Oh, do you want to share your contact information?
Yeah, so if anybody has questions or would like to know more about what I do, or even the business planning course, where the business planning course is actually a course where individuals can walk through each and every process for coming up with a comprehensive business plan. And so by the time you finish the course, you'll have your own business plan that you came up with my guidance, of course, and it'll be something viable. So anybody who is interested in learning that, we're going to have that go out for beta testing very soon. If you're interested in being a beta tester, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Um, that's pretty much it.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks again. Have a great afternoon.